Okay, hey Brent, thanks for coming on the show today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've just come in from location.
Right.
So and you said that you were out in Kaynosa area.
Correct. Yep.
So how's that going for you?
Actually, really well this morning. Other than the normal stuff, waiting for everyone to show up and logistics to show up on time, but the job's going well. And then, of course, after we're done here, I'll be heading back out to button it up.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you were able to make it in, and it sounds like you've been pretty busy. You're making the transition. Your business was has been in Houston for 5 years, and you're pretty new to the Permian Basin.
Yeah, very new, but at the same time, we've been focusing on the Permian Basin and the Delaware Basin. And this year, and what we've seen as a result of that is the revenues have doubled. But it is tough just because we're not part of the standard network, right? So trying to find everybody who's out here and figure out who are the decision makers, and then figure out what is it that they're struggling with, their problems, and how can we help them solve them? And then are we allowed to legally help them solve them because of all of the restrictions around purchasing
Yeah.
and working with other companies?
Absolutely. I've been out here about 8 years, and I know what it's like, to just you kind of show up and you're trying to figure it out, find your people and figure out what's going on. But it's always changing. It's always evolving. And I would say just in these last 8 years, there's been a lot more, regulations and red tape, and then there's fly by night companies and ones that have been here forever. So it is a lot about navigating the course and finding the right people to work with.
Right. Yeah, we see a lot of times where, let's say I was working with another company, they're based out of Louisiana, and we have a great relationship, and then they get relocated to the Permian. And I think that's fantastic because we'll just continue doing work. But they have transitioned under a different company's name. And now, as much as they want to use this, me and or my company in our services, we've got a long process to go through to get the contract signed and to make sure that we can get an MSA and then uh, on their AML. So we're approved to sell them these products. So we're approved to weld on these products and
Hmm.
hot tap. And so it
Yeah.
can be eight months to a year.
It can be a very long process. And, I've found with, some smaller companies, it's can you withstand that waiting time?
Right.
Because then, I mean, you're trying to get an MSA and then you're trying to get on the bid list and you're trying to
Mhm.
stay on the short list and then get the
Right.
project.
It makes me think about a little bit like a weeder class in university, right? Like,
Yes.
can you just suck it up long enough, right?
Right.
If you can stay with it and suck it up, if you can, if you've got a little bit of knowledge of those contracts where you can review a bunch of it yourself, so you're not paying
Yep.
through the nose to have
Hmm.
a lawyer review every word. If you can accept a little bit of that risk, then you can probably get that MSA done. But
Yeah.
otherwise, they'll wait you out.
Yeah, I mean, they really will. And then, I mean, there's so much it depends on, permits and, when the project can start and when it's going to be awarded. And even once it's awarded, there may be a wait time to start.
Right.
And so you've got to have other things going on, supplementing, or, just like you said, having, that kind of savviness to where you can review your own contract. Like being able to save some of that money
Mm.
is going to make a big difference for you.
Right. And then realize too, let's say we hire a lawyer to review the contract. He's going to look at it from the perspective of, I want no risk, right?
Right.
Well, as a small business, especially, I have to look at it a totally different lens. I need to find what risk I'm willing to take. What am I good at and what am I confident at that it looks like a risk on paper to a lawyer? He'd tell you, he or she would say, this is a huge risk. And I'd say, this is not a risk because I do this every day. And here are the steps that we go through to make sure that we don't have an unplanned release, we don't have an injury, we don't have an explosion.
Right.
So on paper, to a layman, they might say, "Oh, that's crazy risky," and I'd say that's what we do Monday
Hmm.
through Friday, right?
Yeah.
Well, and Saturday and
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, oil and gas industry is definitely 24/7. I mean, you might get on a project or, work a job that's only 5 days a week, but traditionally speaking, I mean, oil and gas doesn't ever close.
Right. Yeah. So I got, depending on the week and the projects that's going on, so it's not unusual that not our technicians in the field, but I'll be floating between office work and then field work, and occasionally it'll be 2 or 3 days of where you don't really get a full night's rest. It's typically like an
Yeah.
hour sleep at a truck stop or something like that, and then
Yeah.
it's get up and go again, right?
Absolutely. I've been on projects where I was actually, part of, the hydro testing or needed to be on location, kind of overseeing it, from the, office standpoint, because I
Mhm.
did a lot of field clerking and coordinating and things like that. There was a chapter where I did that and I really enjoyed it, but you are absolutely committed to the project.
Mhm.
And so if you have to, be on location for a shutdown, that's going to be it's Tuesday, it's 2 straight days. Like you're
Mhm.
not leaving the location and
Right.
it's all night long. And I remember on one shutdown, we were waiting, on a test. They were just, doing everything, and there would be like some small issue, and they'd have to kind of start over. And I remember falling asleep in my truck
Mm.
and just sitting out there, like waiting with everybody else. And they came and woke me up about 2:15 and said they were ready to go again. And we got the test knocked out and we finally went home. But I had to be back on location at 7 a.m. for the safety meeting because I was wearing a lot of hats on that project.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of people left. And, it was really just, trying to make it work and get us over the finish line. But I was staying in Andrews at the time, and it was a project in Pyote, so it was an hour and 15 drive. And so I drove an hour and 15 and slept for probably 3 hours and then turned right back around. But it was a little bit of a refuge for me to be able to just leave location for that long
Mhm.
and be in my own environment. And so you learn how to recharge on very little.
Yeah.
And then you roll with it because that's the name of the game out here.
Yep. You're right. It's all about um, being able to understand, especially your body and where your limit is, and you can feel it, right? When it's no longer to be going to be safe. But even just pulling over and you get a rest for 30,
Yep.
45 minutes and you recharge, and then you feel completely
You
different.
really do. But I think it's because you wouldn't necessarily do that in, every industry. It wouldn't translate the same. But because we're such a 24/7 industry, and I mean, there's guys that are on night shift. I
Mhm.
mean, there's people working all night long. And so you're not alone. And, you make that drive. Like we're not, I mean, an hour or 2 hour drive one way is not unheard of. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's
pretty
normal.
standard.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the norm. That's the commute. And then being on location for a 12-hour day is also somewhat standard. So then if you have to pull a 16 or 18-hour day or stay on location for a test or a shutdown, then that's just a little extra. That's not an insurmountable amount of time, but you're just used to it. You're definitely conditioned when you work in the field.
Yeah, I do think it helps. I was just remembering one time when I was really little, maybe I was 8 or 9, and I was thinking, oh, it's the first time I'm gonna stay up for 24 hours around the clock, and I didn't. Of course, I didn't make it very far, and but now, not that we want to do that all the time, but it is so much easier because we know what's at risk,
Yes.
and we know there's a couple of things, right? So we've got lives of others, right? And we're trying to keep each other safe. And then we've also got energy, and it's powering everything, right? And what if we have something go wrong or something go down? We're talking about tens, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people without power per se. Or let's say we're doing a line stop and it's feeding natural gas line to a power plant. It's not okay for it to go down. That's the whole reason why we're doing this is to keep power up and power flowing. And so when you can attach yourself to that purpose, then it makes it a lot easier, right? And then you get the
Yeah.
job done, work like hell, get the job done, and then go get the rest that you need, right?
Right.
And I also think that that's something very interesting and intriguing about today's working world, and maybe potentially one of the few benefits that I've seen out of COVID is I don't believe that humans really feel their full potential when you work. Let's say we'll say 8 to 5 because I don't know anybody who actually works 9 to 5. Right?
Right.
You work an 8 to 5, 5 days a week, and you just keep slogging back and forth through that. It doesn't feel very natural to me. And when I talk to other people and really ask them to think about it, it doesn't feel very natural to them. What does feel natural are periods of sprint or really difficult, challenging work, and then followed by periods of short rest. So let's say maybe you have one week where it's 16, 18-hour days, 20-hour days, and then the next week is pretty moderate.
Hmm.
2 4-hour days, lots of rest, lots of R&R, and then back and forth. And I think if you ask most people what they would prefer, the initial thought would be, oh, I'd rather do my 8 to 5 or
Mhm.
whatever. But then actually get them in that environment and allow them to attack a job and really work at it long and hard, and kind of get in that flow state and try to get it to completion as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And then you get a rest just behind that completion. I think they choose that path more often
You
than
know,
not.
I agree, and I can look back because I've worked in different parts of oil and gas, and when you've got a deadline, or you need to make a certain amount of welds, or you're trying to get gas flowing, you're under contract, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of different reasons that you could be trying to get it done in a hurry, but there's a lot of momentum behind that.
Hmm.
You're literally creating the avenues which the energy is going to transfer through. You're the energy making it happen, and then you're working around all of these components, so there's a lot of momentum with that, and I agree. And then you're excited because maybe there's a holiday coming up, you're going to get a good rest.
Right.
But for me, whenever I've tried to work the 8 to 5 40-hour week, it's almost more tiring
Yeah.
because you're constantly like you're trying to talk yourself into it. You're the day's already started basically, because I mean when you're working oil and gas, like safety meetings at 7 a.m.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're already working by the time most people are
Yeah.
finally just
You
like,
left at 5:30 to
yeah,
get to the
like,
site for the
yeah,
7 a.m.
exactly. You got up at 4 a.m. and you're out there and we're already talking about the day. And I mean, there could already been, a couple of welds made before most people are even getting on their email.
Right.
And then when you work in an office environment like that or 40-hour week, all you're thinking about is the weekend. And then you do that every week and you start it over again. And so then you've got all this extra energy going out into nowhere basically,
Right.
because you don't have that conditioning. You're just maintaining that muscle, and it can be very average.
Hmm.
You don't have that adrenaline rush. You don't have that that connection like with your own body, that you're pushing
Right.
limits and you're creating new limits.
Hmm.
You're just sustaining when you work a job like that. And so then you kind of get complacent. And I think there's more burnout in that lifestyle
Right.
than if you're in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. One of the things that always driven me nuts about a 9 to 5 type job too is sometimes it hides that there's capacity or capability for more. What I mean there is, let's say I'm an engineer and I'm working on stuff. Well, I know I have till what time? 5. I know I have till 5. So sometimes I take a task that's maybe only 30 minutes and I stretch it out for several hours. And even if, let's say, you are in an office environment all the time, which we often end up in that environment, I think it's critical to finish those tasks earlier and then go home.
Yeah, agreed.
Don't stay
And
till
just
5.
watching the clock,
And
it
and
doesn't make any sense.
right, and as a boss or a manager or a leader, this is a great signal to me that I know they're getting their work done and they've got a little bit more capacity. And then I get to help work with them on a decision. Is it we have more work that we need to be done that I can pass on to you? Maybe
Mhm.
I can delegate some of my tasks so that you can start learning some of those. Or maybe it's, you know what, you've been a rock star for a long time and you're just going to get to go home at 3 for the next couple of weeks because you're crushing your work.
Right.
And but don't stay till don't be watching the clock and say, "Oh, at 5:01 I'm
Oh
clocking
my
out."
goodness, I
I
know.
I can't
Well, it's
stand
a
it.
soul crusher and you're not being efficient and you're not being that productive. But I've seen welders, especially when, hey, if you can get this many weld inches done by 3 o'clock, we'll pay you 10 hours and you can take Sunday off. And, a lot of these guys come from out of town or out of state. And so that's a big deal
Right.
to them to be able to get that drive time.
Mhm.
And especially if they're doing a good job. Now, if they're going to bust x-ray, that's a different story, but they still got to have the quality there.
Right.
But when you have that kind of incentive, the trade is worth it because then you buckle down, you get to work, and then you feel that sense of accomplishment. There's almost a euphoria to it
Right.
because you were able to get that much work done in a shorter amount of time instead of trying to like make the work stretch,
Right.
and you're going slow and you're just milking the clock, and you may not necessarily be doing it deliberate, but if you know you got to be there till 5, you don't have a goal, you
Mhm.
don't have a quota, you don't have anything you're working towards, so you're just kind of in that mundane like zone, and nobody does their best work there. And I feel like that's where a lot of accidents happen because people are too complacent and they're not paying attention. You
Fascinating, fascinating because One of the interesting things about the mind. So I study a lot of stuff, weird stuff. I'm really into like theory of constraints, lean, and then trying to figure out how does that apply necessarily to um, a processing plant. That's pretty easy. But how about how we go about projects or we go
Mhm.
about construction?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I ran across an article a while back, and it was talking. Not an article. There's a methodology. I would call it a learning methodology called the Toyota Kata. Kata really stands for like practice, right? When they're doing, if you watch somebody doing not jujitsu, what's it called, like karate or something, they do these weird moves and they do them over and over again, and that's called a kata, and that's what
Okay.
they practice. And if you do the kata enough, then they test you on the kata. It's the exact same thing. The test is exactly what you've been practicing, and they're looking for your form, right? And how enthusiastic you are, and do you hit all the points just
Mhm.
right, and that's how they grade you, and you get to pass and move on. All right. What happens is, how does the kata relate to the mind and assumptions? And here's a great example. So the brain is so efficient, right? And if it was fully engaged all day, we would burn so many calories just
Mhm.
from your brain, right? So if you look at like chess, or is it chess? Yeah, chess
Mhm.
grandmaster champions, they can burn 5 or 6 thousand calories in a day, and they're sedentary the whole time, right? But they're just chewing through all of these logic possibilities. Well, that's not efficient at all. So what your brain does is, if it knows this routine, it kind of switches it over to auto ride mode, and it does it much more efficiently. So I don't know if you've ever driven home and you got home and you thought like, I'm not really sure how I got here, but that was your brain being really smart and
Mhm.
basically saying, I've got this, right?
Mhm.
Like, you go check out a little bit because I know how to get you home safely, right?
Mhm.
And that happens all the time.
Mhm.
But the the challenge there is, that's not a learning state, right? So
Right.
that's a survival a method that helps us cope with the daily environment. Can
Mhm.
you imagine if we had to think through every movement, right? If I had to say, oh, I need to move my arm over and then down to
Right.
set it like this, you couldn't possibly get anything done. So your brain is switching between assumption based mode, that's what I like to call it, and the thinking mode or the learning process. It's rather binary. It's really in one or the other. It really can't do both at the same time.
Mhm.
And so but it's pretty fascinating. Really fascinating.
And I study things like that too. I haven't heard of that, but I can understand it to a degree because of just books that I've read and lectures that I've listened to. But I can apply that in my experience in seeing guys on location where if nothing is going on, the weather's not changing, everything's pretty stagnant, and just nothing's happening. But all of a sudden, somebody comes on the location that you weren't expecting. It changes the dynamic. And maybe it's the boss, or maybe it's inspector, the chief inspector
Yep.
shows up. All of a sudden,
Everybody's safety gloves go on,
yeah,
and
you're in Superman mode.
right.
You're the one out there. You're getting the tagline on the end of the
Hmm.
pipe. You're digging, and you got all of this adrenaline. But it's because you're now stimulated by something else. And so yes, that same work that you know how to do, you just put it in overdrive and you're doing it more efficiently. I mean, it's amazing what can get done in that kind of circumstance. Or if bad weather's coming and we've got to get the location roped off, whatever, ready to go. Because I mean, you never know in West Texas, especially. It's amazing how quickly we can move when we see this dust storm
Yeah.
coming from the horizon. Or if you find out, hey, we're going to leave early today, and it changes everything. And so I think that finding different ways to boost morale and challenge that and make it to where you don't stay on that autopilot. Like, one, I firmly believe that a lot of acts, like especially small accidents,
Hmm.
pinch points, like little things that can
And
take
yeah,
place,
all the injuries pretty much to the hands, right?
lots to the hands. I've seen horrific hand injuries
Hmm.
because guys aren't paying attention and they're putting a blind on the end of a flange, and
Hmm.
they get their hand caught in between, or they're
Yeah.
putting it inside, like the where the bolts go, and you shouldn't do that, or it's terrible what can happen.
Hmm.
But a lot of it's really avoidable. But we get so used to the work,
Hmm.
and or you're tired, or you don't have anybody leading the way, saying, okay guys, this is what we're going to get done today, or this is what we need to do by Saturday. If we can get this much work done, we're all going to quit at 3 and get paid for 10. So anything like that, any
Mhm.
kind of incentive to trick your brain. You
Mhm.
know, it's like if you're on autopilot driving home and you suddenly had to slam on your brakes because someone pulled out in front of you. All of a sudden you're like, "Whoa, hey, what's going on?" And then you regroup. So I can see where like some of those calories get burned when you are, really applying yourself and making your brain work, because your brain is going to function with or without your permission. It's
Mhm.
a matter of if you want to take it to an advanced level
Right.
and what you can do in that state.
Mhm. Yeah, you're exactly right. And it feels, I mean, people have talked about there's different, states there, the flow state is one that's
Yes.
very popular. In
Mhm.
fact, I just stumbled on a company, off the just remembered, there's a company that looks like all they're doing is just helping coach leaders and managers is how to achieve a flow state more regularly, essentially on demand. But yeah, being able to know, hey, when is it time for me to be on autopilot and when is it time for me to be fully engaged, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And when I think about being fully engaged too, one of the things when I think about a leader, it's a very it's an interesting idea of what is a leader exactly, and then how it goes to being engaged or disengaged. A leader's job is really simple, but it's not easy. It is just two things. One, to make sure that you can paint a clear picture
Mhm.
of the future, of where we're headed. But that's only half of it because the second part is how do you paint the picture so that your team can see themselves in the future? Not just your future, it's their future or our collective future, right? And then how do we engage them to where they can be happy and fulfilled and not happy all the time, right? But they can have a really tough day. I mean, a just a terrible day, but feel like they're fulfilled
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
saw some movement and some progress. And once you've got that big picture painted, let's say we're talking like 3 years out or 5 years out, you're working on a big thing, you're trying to build a business, build a brand, whatever. The next step that I like to say is once we've got that, is okay, that's great. We've thought big, we've clearly outlined this picture, and now it is time to change gears. And I want you to think as small as possible
Mhm.
and go through this progress. And I almost guarantee people you're not thinking small enough, right? So I want to think about your task by today. What is the thing that I have to do that I could potentially test scientifically today to know if I'm moving the needle in the right direction towards my vision or am I getting further away
Right.
from it, right? And think smaller, smaller, smaller. And we think if we think about a job that's going on right now, I was on a job site um, with a supervisor, and he was one of the best that I've ever seen. And he's doing this; he doesn't even know it. He's just probably learned it through his experience. But we usually get together at the safety meeting and say, "Okay, here's what we're going to do today," right? And we talk about it as the end of the day. Well, he talked about it. Here's what the objective is for the end of the day, but and then he backed it up by smaller time segments. So he said, "All right, so we're gonna do this task first. It's gonna be finished by 9:30 a.m. We're gonna break huddle. Then we're gonna look at the next task, and it's gonna be 10:30, and kind of split it up." And what ended up happening is people had these smaller, I mean, much smaller targets that are just 2 hours out, and they're hustling to get that done. And then they have a little sense of accomplishment when
Mhm.
it is done. So they kind of get a little bit of dopamine. They also get a little bit of a break, right?
Right.
As it rest. And everybody, and he didn't even realize he's doing this, but he's debriefing
Mhm.
with them. And so they're learning on the job as to how are they coordinating, communicating, working together. How did that last task go? Okay, now we understood, or we've got a few learnings. They're all unofficial. It's not written down,
Right.
right? And that's okay. And then we move on to the next one. Oh, is the target still the same, right?
Mhm.
Did something deviate in the first set of
Yeah.
tasks where now we need to change course? If so, let's change course. If not, let's just make sure we are clear as to what it is and what that time frame is, what the goal is, and then attack it and tackle it. And anyways, it was fantastic to
Yeah.
watch him work like that.
And I really like that, and I can appreciate it because, with time blocking, you can take that big picture and break it down into like segments in the day. and then you are working towards that big picture. It's that one brick at a time
Mhm.
where you're not getting overwhelmed and you don't understand. It's really like, oh, okay, well, we need to make this many welds, or we need to get this much trench dug, or whatever, part of the industry that it's in, it can be directly applied to oil and gas. And I
Mhm.
think it's important because you look at the amount of hours that are put into the daily life of an oil and gas worker. You want to be efficient, you want to be safe, and you want to make the right amount of progress to where you as an individual, as the worker, you want to feel like you're contributing, and that when you get your check at the end of the week, there's that sense of pride and accomplishment. But it takes a leader that knows how to motivate the team and keep them on track, and like you said, debriefing
Mhm.
to where you're understanding what's going on. I've been on so many locations where it's a very Mickey Mouse organization. People are just showing up and looking busy,
Right.
or it's
And
just like,
people are driving around everywhere, going here, there to get something. Oh,
yeah, it's like you're driving to from one location to get the hammer and another location to get the nail.
right. That's which how it happens every freaking day, right?
I'm telling you.
It makes me think, too, I think there's a lot of, links between that your brain going to that assumptions based mode versus the learning mode, especially if we're looking at, injuries to your hands. A lot of times, like for your example of they're putting a blind flange on, right? Uh, their mind is somewhere else as they're doing this task.
Hmm.
So essentially, they think they're multitasking. And if there's one thing that we are learning more and more about, it is that your brain is not good at multitasking. And
Right.
there are some people who are much more talented, like everyone who works in a drive-through and takes orders. I can't even, if I'm on the phone and somebody comes to ask me a question, just, I mean, my brain explodes.
Right.
I cannot do it. I know I can do one thing at a time well, or I can do 10 things at a time absolutely
Yeah,
poorly,
absolutely.
right? And so we think we're multitasking, we think we're being really efficient. Really, what it is it'd be much more effective if we just said, you know what, pause that one thing, and we're going to do this thing, and then we're going to come back, which is very interesting because that's exactly how a processor works in a computer. So when we have, let's say you've got 10 browsers open or 10 pages,
Oh
that's what
goodness,
they
yes.
called, right? And then you've got Excel open and your Outlook and all that sort of stuff. It looks like it's all happening at the same time, right?
Mhm.
No,
It's
those are
not.
one at a time. And yeah, they've got processors that kind of can split it so they can run some parallel, but we're talking maybe two things at a time.
Mhm.
And this is stuff that's dedicated to doing nothing but processing ones and zeros. It's not good at
Right.
doing multiple things at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, for me, I hear people pride themselves in, multitasking all the
Mhm.
time. And I've just never been able to do it because, like, something's gonna get dropped,
Yeah.
something's gonna get neglected, or, if you get unexpected news in the middle of all that multitasking,
Mhm.
then you're thrown for a loop, and that's affecting the quality of your work.
Mhm.
Or, guys that are putting that blind flange on and somebody hollers at them that they need something else over here.
Mhm.
Especially on a facility, you've got multiple groups working together at
Right.
once. You've got mechanical, you've got electrical, you might have painters, you've got deliveries coming. And so you got to prioritize that, and you got to be able to step back. Well, if you're just, focusing on, what's in front of you, what's around you, you've got your 10 browsers open, so to speak, even like in real
Right.
life, you're going to miss something. What is more important? Do you need
Mhm.
that operator to go set the joint of pipe in the jack stands for the welders to make the weld so those welders aren't standing around? Or do you need to get the load off of this truck because this guy's not going anywhere, but we just saw him show up. So let's all hurry up and go over here and do this. And then you're like, we got to hurry though, because we got to set the pipe in the jack stands. Where if you just took a step back, got this done, they're taken care of, move over here, take care of this. Now it gives these guys something to do. And then you're getting something set up. So to be a leader and to manage like that complex environment, you got to be able to think with all those channels. You're not necessarily multitasking the channels because you're delegating.
Mhm.
And if you've got your people that are, good with each group, or you've got, foreman, superintendent on location, they're like, yep, they've got it. They think like that. Then you're going to be efficient. Then you're going to be safe, and you're going to get more work done in a shorter amount of time than if you're just running around in the chaos.
Right. Yeah, you're totally right. It makes me think a little bit about, I noticed I struggle with this lately. You ever watch like Netflix or something and then you're also on your phone?
Oh yeah.
I do it
What are you
all the time.
doing with
I don't
that?
I do it all the time now, and I don't know why, and it bothers me, and I've been trying to be more intentional about putting the phone down and just watching that show or whatever it is, right? And I notice I get so much more joy, I would say, or enjoyment out of that if I am singularly focused or basically just being present in the moment versus trying to split it up. And you think, well, no, you could enjoy both at the same time. Maybe you could, but I just
Well,
can't.
I mean, in a sense, like if you're trying to unwind and take a few minutes and answer an email or two, but if you're on Netflix and you're also on social media, pick one.
Right.
Because if the show's not that good, then turn off the show.
Hmm.
But if you take that break from social media and you're watching something engaging, whether it's something just entertaining or a documentary, you're learning something, then you're fueled up in a different way, and then you can get on social media and engage. Or if you're posting for your work, your business, I mean, you can think like, oh, I'm doing it for work, but you're taking away from your work because you're not really paying enough attention to how that's coming across, so you're just depleting your energy at the same time. So I agree, because it's like, why would you put something on and then get on your phone? But it's an automatic reflex, I think. It's like, I
Uh,
will actually make myself leave my phone in the other room if I want to read. If
yeah.
I'm going to read a book, especially, I will not have my phone in the room, because I do not want to take away from that. I used to read a lot, and I still read quite a bit, but not nearly as much as I used to, because everything's on your phone.
Hmm.
You can read articles, you can listen to podcasts, and so to actually pick up the book and turn the pages, like, don't rob yourself of that, because it's such a different experience when you read a physical book in your hands than if you're looking at something on your phone.
Do you like reading stuff on electronic devices?
You know, I don't love it.
I
I
don't
I have
either.
tried to get
I
into the Kindle, and
We never bought one.
I didn't
The
either. I
wife
just
and I
tried to my
just
app on my
refused.
iPad, and I still don't like
It's
it.
not the same.
Turning the
I
page.
don't know. Well, I guess you know how they say people are certain types of learners, right? Like some people are
Yes.
visual, some are auditory, tactile. I think those are the three.
Yeah,
There might be some
hands-on.
more. It's baloney. Everybody is more than those things at the same time for how they learn.
Mhm.
Basically, it takes more than one of those things for you to learn. And I think as silly as it is, but holding that book and feeling that kind of rough paper, and then you
Absolutely.
hear the noise, and it
Mhm.
just creates a full experience versus
Yeah, and then you're immersed in it.
right.
And I feel the same way, like just turning that front cover and going through it, and some people, like, it's a daunting task
Mm-hmm.
to read. And it can take a little while to get into a book, but once you do, it's so enriching.
Hmm. I wonder if, just thinking about it, when let's say I'm reading a long article, or let's say you have a Kindle, and I've read off of a friend's before, and it has the page number like in the top
Oh yeah.
right corner, I think,
Mhm.
but you don't really see your progress per se,
Right.
even if you
You
knew
don't
that's
see the
500
the
pages,
thickness of it.
right? But when I dog ear the pages, uh, but when you have that physical book and then you dog ear the page or you put the bookmark and you set it down, you can visualize
There's a
your
sense of
progress,
accomplishment.
right? And it's totally transformative. And
It is.
it's such a I think it's something about how we're wired, really.
I agree. And, like, sometimes, like, I think it's been a while since, because I tried to do the Kindle app on my iPad, and I never could get into it because I wanted to read the actual book.
I didn't know they had an app for
They
the
do.
iPad,
Yeah,
which would make
they
sense.
do. And it does. And I mean, I want to say, like, oh, less paper and trees and all the
Yep.
things, and it's so efficient, but it's I mean, it's a dying breed, because everything's going digital, and I mean, rightfully so,
Mhm.
because I mean, there is a lot of waste. But I'll have 4 or 5 books that I'm working on, and however I read them, of, like, some will be like, I mean, I have one, I've had this book forever, but I do play chess, and I have Bobby Fischer teaches chess.
Okay.
And it's very old. Some of my books are very old, or they're like the revised edition, or a book about marketing from like 1992. And I mean, you're reading about IBM and fax machines, but it's timeless,
Mhm.
because it still translates, like, the actual the just the laws of marketing are very similar. But for me, reading words off of paper like that are actually typed and produced, it's so different than just this like digital dialogue. I don't feel like you get the same, you don't
Yeah.
get, it's not the same experience, but I don't feel like you get that overall experience. And like you said, seeing the book sitting there. So normally what I do is, when I finish this group of books, there'll be something entertaining, easy read, maybe a bio on somebody, and some of my marketing books, things like that, or just whatever's going on. And I usually, once I finish that stack, I'll donate them to the library.
Oh, that's a
And
great idea.
yeah, I love doing that because there was a time, and I'm a minimalist too. I live in a very small space. And
Mhm.
so there was a time when I had all my books and they were really starting to, it was like
Right.
my living space was literally becoming like a library, but it was so unnecessary. And I was traveling, this isn't a 1988 vintage camper on the highway. This is just more weight.
Yeah.
And,
Just
I
breaking everything
yeah,
down
and I
with
mean
the
and then I'm having to put them in places when I'm traveling, and so I started donating my books to the library, and I thought, it was a way to kind of keep it going. Like I was supporting the author, whoever the author was. I can appreciate their book, I can buy their book, invest in it, and then I can share that with others. And then I don't have the physical weight surrounding me, because if I'm never going to read the book again, and
Mhm.
even if you're going to read the book again, okay, but if you're not, like, what are you doing with it? It's
Right.
just going to collect dust. And so that's a little bit of my practice. And so whenever I read, I really try and be mindful the whole experience, from leave the phone in another room, don't even pick it up for a text message, don't rob yourself of that.
I need to start doing that. I have heard a lot of people recently talking about they sleep with their phone in the other room. Even if you use it as the alarm clock, they'll put it in a different room. That way it just kind of gives you a little envelope of, hey, now this is the rest time.
Yeah.
Right? Put it away.
Yeah.
It's had its time, it's done its job. It's your job right now is to rest and recuperate.
And really to refuel. And I think that, like where we are in, that our age with AI, and everything's digital, everybody's on social media, everybody's doing something in this this wireless age, which is fantastic. There's so much that we can do, but it's not about like what can AI do instead of us, but how, we can utilize it and make it work to our advantage. But you don't want to neglect yourself as a consumer, that all of this is available to you 24/7. Every second of your day, you could be on your phone. You could be, putting that energy out. It's your responsibility to refuel and learn what is necessary and what's working for you and what's wasting your time.
Yeah, that makes me think about, technology solutions in general. They're tricky. And when I say solutions, that's the word a lot of people use, like a solution, but it's not at all. It's what it is it's just a multiplier. So whatever you're doing, let's say you've got a process, and let's say it's a terrible process. And a lot of times we'll think, well, I'm sure there's somebody who makes a software who can help me automate this. If it's automating your process, all it's going to do is just be 10 times worse. It's just going to amplify what it is that you're already doing. So if
Mm,
you're doing something that's really, really great, well, okay, it could help you. It could be 10 times better, right? Maybe it's 10 times more efficient or 10 times more effective. But if all you do is take your really crappy process and then you slap a piece of software on it, it's probably worse. Right?
yeah,
It's not doing you any favors. In fact, it's worse now because now you're managing a software instead of the process,
right.
right? And now you're paying extra money for this software, or this piece of equipment, or whatever, and it's
So
just
you're
gets
kind of
silly.
missing the point by a mile. Like you have to figure out the process and then find a way to automate it to where it's safer,
Right.
it's more yeah, efficient with your time
Mhm.
and energy. But it's understanding that concept and then being able to develop, that like a process or something innovative.
Right. There's the company that I used to work for years ago. They still have some phenomenal manufacturing capabilities, but they had these manufacturing cells making these fittings. So we're machining flanges, doing a lot of welding, pressure vessel coated
Hmm.
welding. And this company's over 100 years old. So how did they manage that back before ERP systems?
Oh
Well,
wow.
really easily, actually. They set up the cells, so it's a common workflow, and make sure it's ergonomic and people don't have to move very far, yada, yada. Take a bunch of people and equipment that all share the same task or process and combine them in an area. Basically, you've got a cell that's more effective, right? And but instead of an ERP, they have a wall that basically has these like tickets essentially, right? And it says, look, these tickets represent how many physical items we're going to keep in WIP and how many physical items we're going to keep in inventory. And when we get an order, we're going to take one out and hand it to the guy at the front of the cell, and that's his authorization to work. It basically says, go ahead, make this whole part. And they would do thousands
Okay.
of
Yeah.
these fittings every year, probably somewhere between 10 and 30,000 through this plant per year. No problem. No ERP software, no planner, no scheduler up on a computer typing all of that sort of stuff.
They're just organized.
It's organized, and it's a visual management system of anybody can walk up and say, I've got a problem, or I see what needs to be made, and they're empowered to just go make it, right? And then you've got all these software companies who have the best salesmen in the world, and they're selling every software solution under the
Yeah.
sun. And if you think about it, then especially if you look at some of the manufacturing processes, that the output has actually gone down since we've used these larger ERP softwares.
Okay.
But when you look at it as effectiveness or efficiency, and you include everybody in the front office who's now required to input data into this system, right?
Okay.
When you group them in it, your production is actually down. If you pull them out, it looks like, hey, things are going up. But I think you're just not looking at the whole picture. Now you've got a handful of people that we have to pay full time
Well, right,
to be up here.
exactly. And something that I've seen in oil and gas, especially, like you've got a lot of extra people that you're trying to give them tasks or titles that might not really be necessary,
Right,
that could actually be bringing everything down because, I mean, that's payroll, that's overhead.
right,
And, we can do more individually than trying to get, one task per person just to fill those spots or just to have, this title
hmm,
filled, because there's all kinds of, you'll see a lot of titles in oil and gas or a lot of job descriptions that could really be under one umbrella.
right. Yeah. It also makes me think about the difference between effectivity and efficiency. And back to this manufacturing plant, everybody's, especially accountants, they love to look at your efficiency rate, right? So if I could make 10 widgets today, how much of my time did I spend making those 10 widgets? If I spend 100% of my time making those 10 widgets, I'm 100% efficient, right? But I could be 0% effective. And you say that and think, well, how could that be? I made 10 of those widgets. What if you made 10 of widget A and the customer only ordered widget B?
And then there was no,
A total waste.
yeah,
It's an absolute total waste. You would have been better off not doing anything that
right.
day. Because not only have you spent all of that time, you made 10 widget A's that now have to go into inventory. You have to pay somebody to manage, move, store. It's
Hmm.
going to get rusty. We're going to lose it,
Yeah.
right? You're not
Oh,
going to, you're
somebody's
not going to know
definitely
where it
going to
is.
lose it.
I was on a job yesterday. We won't talk about who it was, but we're looking for a couple of globe valves and gate valves. They're running around. They
Oof.
hot shot, get an order in here, and about 3/4 of the way through the job, they realized they had got 2 pallets of them in the
Yeah.
back of the plant, right? And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah, we could
it's
swap stories about that
there's
all
just so much
day.
stuff going on. It's hard for you
And
to
it's easy.
remember where everything
Yeah, it's
is.
easy to misplace stuff, especially on location,
Yeah,
because that may have been delivered, that guy wasn't there, and somebody set it over here,
and
and
it
they
gets
didn't know,
moved too.
and then it gets moved.
We're always moving equipment and people,
Mhm.
and that means wherever you put it is probably not the right spot. It's gonna have to be moved again,
Right.
so because the operation is highly mobile, and then somebody tucks it in the corner, and you've forgotten about it, and, now you order a double one,
Oh,
right?
yeah. And that can be very pricey though, because I mean, a lot of stuff comes out of Houston.
Yeah,
And so then,
especially valves, right?
yeah,
Valves are coming out
absolutely.
of Houston 9 times out of
Valves,
10.
oh my goodness,
And are they heavy or what?
they are extremely heavy and they're complicated
Mhm.
because there's so many different types of valves.
My gosh.
And I mean, and then you've got to make sure that you're ordering the right one, the right pressure,
The whole
and
reason we were on that job yesterday to begin with is the wrong valves got selected when they built this part of the plant. So they put in some ball valves. That was the wrong choice
mhm.
on the engineer's perspective. Probably he didn't realize.
Yeah, I
But
didn't know because it doesn't always translate.
with that product, he was thinking, oh, I'll get these ball valves because those are great, right?
Mhm.
Everybody knows ball valves are great. Well, in this environment, all that's going to happen is the product was just going to eat the seals and just
Oh, yeah.
slowly deteriorate.
And
So
there's just
this
no
would have been
way.
better for a
Mhm.
gate valve, right?
Yeah. No, and understandably, and then when you need specialty valves
No,
and then you have to wait, I mean, that can
forget it.
cost the project.
Yep.
Yeah, this isn't just like a small error. It's hard enough if you're out in, Pyote or Cayenosa and you need to go and get something from Odessa,
Right.
or you're waiting for them to deliver it. I mean, you're going to have a little bit of downtime there. You might be able to make up for it, but if you need a specific valve
Mhm.
to launch or to move forward and they're like, "Oh, these are back ordered and they're coming out of Houston." Like, I mean, the fear that would set in with that.
We've got one right now, 24-inch made in the USA ball valve, 600-pound class, and
Okay, yeah.
it's we haven't received it yet. I think we're coming up on 6 months now.
Yeah.
So I know it's mid-December is the delivery date, and we'll wait because that was the client's
Mhm.
spec, is it
Yeah,
had
I
to be
mean, and
made in
when
the
it's done
USA.
to spec and you know that, but it's when you need an X heavy pipe and you order double XL or standard, you are so screwed.
Right, imagine we ordered the wrong spec valve, and it
Yeah,
comes in when we're expecting it, but we find
right.
out it's wrong.
And then all this wait time, I mean, I've been in those moments. I've seen them happen.
It feels terrible.
It's an awful feeling.
It feels like
It's
you just wanna throw up, like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
it really
man."
does, and I mean, and you might need to depending on how the conversation goes with your
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
There's, like, understanding to a degree, but sometimes I mean, it really just depends, but
Mhm.
it's gonna cost you, and it's so unnecessary, but those are the kinds of details that you gotta focus on, and you don't wanna be multitasking
Right.
because you make a mistake like that, you
That's
need a 300 and you get a 600, or you need a 900 and those don't come around all the time.
right.
I mean, and because I worked in a fab shop. I did some QC work and documentation, and I'd never been around, building the
Mhm.
tanks, turning the sheets into the actual, like, I mean, we had the roller
Right.
and ordering the heads and you having to measure the thickness and then putting all the different valves on these vessels.
Mhm.
And so you've got 300 flanges, 600 flanges, you've got all the, and then you've got the heater treaters and,
Mhm.
the inside mechanism. And so you've got a lot of different components going into these vessels.
Mhm.
And so when you order the wrong size and most of it's custom anyway, you've just wasted all that money and time and energy
Big
and
time.
your self-respect and everything else goes out the window because it was you who ordered it and thankfully I was never the one ordering it.
Right.
I
That's the best part about quality, huh?
Yeah, it was.
It's never
I'm
it's never
like,
your
look,
fault.
but when you want to shoot the messenger, I'm lucky to be sitting here
Yeah.
because a lot of times having to go back and say, hey, you guys, look, this is what it says on your ordering ticket. This is what came in. They're not matching. And I mean, a couple of times they had me go put it in the warehouse and we'll order another one. But, I've seen that, I've been there on those, horrific days when you realize that it was the wrong material.
Right.
Valves and flanges, I would say absolutely 100%. Like you really got to be on top of your game
Mhm.
because you can cost yourself a lot of money.
Absolutely, and a lot of it's in the details too, because you can say, "Oh, I'm ordering a 24-inch,
Yeah.
600-pound extra heavy flange."
Hmm.
Well, what is it being used for? Because depending on the client and the application, we need to look at the chemistry of the Ford. Maybe the manganese is too high, so it's not compliant with MSS SP 75.
Yes.
Most people aren't going to look at it, but
Right.
you have to.
You do.
And if that's critical to you, it's on you as you're specing it out to communicate clearly to the vendor. Say, look, this manganese has to be under certain percent, right?
Right.
And be that clear. A lot of times I've seen where they'll say it's got to be B16.5 compliant. Oh, that's not enough, right? Yeah, people can go find those codes, but that's going to take a dedicated engineer,
Hmm.
probably, to go
Right.
look up the code, know the code, be able to identify it. It'd be better off if you just said, "Hey, it needs to be MSS SP 75, and by the way, here's the limits on some of
Yeah.
the chemicals that we have in here."
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I can see where that would save a lot of unnecessary legwork
Mm.
and liability.
Right.
So you've been telling me a little bit about the move. You
Hmm.
you were in Houston and then you've ventured your way out here and a little bit of the challenges that you've faced. And so a lot of this that we've been talking about, like, the day-to-day challenges and the task. And, obviously you've got a really great mindset as far as getting the work done efficiently and, being proactive and futuristic thinking and being innovative. And so, like within your company, like what have you been able to bring to the Permian that might be a little bit different, or kind of what you guys are working on?
Actually, that's a great question. And when I first got to Iron Pro, it's very much so I call it a turnaround, right? So to be very transparent, the company was failing, and we needed to make a choice, right? Either it's going to go under, or we need to turn this thing around.
Mhm.
So that's what I signed up for, knowing that it's pretty tough to do, but also extremely exciting. And when we looked at it, okay, how can we turn this thing around? We do hot taps and we do line stops. Well, there's a lot of other companies that do that. TD Williamson, WeldFit, Team, those are kind of the three big guys out there. We all use the same equipment. I mean, it's either TD Williamson equipment or this other company that's out of Chicago. We all cut the hole essentially the same way. We use similar valves. Logistics are the same. Technicians are relatively the same. Training's different. Of course,
Mhm.
personalities is different. So, how exactly do you differentiate yourself? So, there's a few things you can do. You could pull the price lever. You say, I'm just going to drop the price to
Oh,
the
yeah.
bottom dollar.
Yeah.
It's the wrong thing to do,
It really is.
right? It doesn't do anybody favors in the long term. Now, I'm not saying that you don't need to be market driven and that you need to be appropriately priced, but I'm saying don't race to the bottom. You're providing a very valuable service and you need to know it and act like it. But what we've really done to differentiate ourselves is the industry's first guarantee of on-time product or it's free. And it's been reception has been fantastic. If not at the beginning, when I tell someone that a potential customer, that you typically kind of laugh and look at me like you're joking, right? You're not going to give me this $30,000 for fitting for free. And first of all, I'm saying no, I'm not going to because I'm not going to be late
Right.
because I've set up my manufacturing processes and everything so that we're going to be on time. We're still going to keep inventory low. We're going to not carry a bunch of costs, but we understand what it takes to make these and we're going to get it done every time. And if we do miss it, we will give it to you.
Yeah.
But we haven't missed one yet, too.
That's exciting.
And that's really helped
I mean, that
because
that speaks volumes.
the project timelines are so critical out here. So the job that I'm on right now, the whole reason that we're on it is because somebody else couldn't take care of it,
Yeah.
and they're trying to get it done because they'd like to give the guys all of Thanksgiving week off, right? So we're trying to help them get that project done so that everybody can be off for full Thanksgiving, and it's just critical that the projects go on time as scheduled. You've got a contractor, a construction services crew who's hiring NDT guys, welders,
Mhm.
uh, you know, diggers, riggers, lifting nitrogen, then hydrovac services.
Mhm.
You have all of these guys lined up. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yes.
and you're waiting on a $15,000 fitting?
Right.
No, no, it's just not okay, right? So what we do is we just say, look, we're going to establish ourselves. We're going to be confident in ourselves. We'll give the team what they need to make sure that they can build it on time. And we're going to be on time every time. There's a few things that we've done in there, but what we really changed is our manufacturing methodology. And there's nothing new here, but it's a lot like Legos. So we don't build a bunch of widget A. If you've ordered widget B, we have everything about halfway built. And
Yeah.
then what we do most days is nothing. If there's no order, we don't build a single thing at all. It would be better to just sit there and watch Netflix or YouTube in the shop all day.
Right.
And then as soon as there's an order, we're pulling stuff down to build exactly the widget that they ordered and nothing more.
Mhm.
And it's been
Yeah.
highly effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that because you're not just working for the sake of working. It sounds like you've sharpened your axe,
Mm,
and I mean it's ready when you need to use it,
right.
and that does seem to be a lot more effective and efficient because again with the chaos of it all. Like, and I think that a lot of people are trying to get a hold of that, and they just want work to be smoother, and there's no reason to have all of you know the double working. And one thing that they've always said in welding, because like we're measuring and cutting, you measure twice and cut once,
Mhm.
period.
Right. Yeah, especially when you're talking a 30-inch pipe. You
Exactly.
better get this thing spot on.
Yeah,
Right.
because I've definitely seen them mess it up, and it's
Mhm.
not good.
Right.
It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the person that did it. It's not good for whoever's paying for it, and it's not even good for morale for the people that are around you.
Mhm.
Because then that you're going to have to rework that, or you're working late and you weren't expecting to, or it's just a mess.
Right. So we've been really focused on that. Of course, we believe that most of the market for hot tapping is in the Permian and the Delaware Basin. It's tough to get that research exactly, but just from anecdotal interviews and talking to different clients and how
Mhm.
much work is out here. So we really believe that the majority of the work is out here and it's going to
Yeah.
be out here
Yeah,
for the
absolutely.
next decade at least.
Mhm.
And then another thing that we've done is we really want to emphasize giving back into this community specifically, right? Even though the shop is based out of Houston, so we, of course, partner with the pipeliners associations in the area, but we've also partnered with them and we've built up a military Humvee and we take it around to events and we're selling raffle tickets and all of the proceeds go to the pipeliners education fund.
Oh,
So to help
wow.
us
Yeah.
establish the next generation of pipeliners, because we talked earlier, but one of my biggest concerns, obviously I need to grow the business here in the Permian. There is plenty of work, so I just need to go out and get it, but long term, I'm worried about the doers and the people who are going to have the skills to work out here in the field. It's always going to require that kind of hybrid ability to both work in the office and be out in the field and to be able to respect both worlds.
Mhm.
And we are concerned about the future because a lot of kids that are going to school right now, when you ask them what they want to do, of course, influencer is number one
Oh,
right
yeah.
now, but there's a lot of focus in building softwares and IT technology and all that sort of stuff. Very, very valuable. But at the end of the day, out here, what keeps us going, we're basically running giant piping networks, right?
Yeah.
And they don't put themselves in, right? They're very
No,
much so a manual process.
and then, I mean, you can't use software to turn wrenches.
Right,
There's always going to be a need for that blue collar type of work, but being able to do both,
right.
you're going to secure, more jobs, have
Mhm,
more longevity, be more valuable because I think that like, what we've all realized, especially like as we move forward, like how much more we're capable of doing
mhm,
and to not have such, drastic overhead
mhm.
and people not being able to do more than one job. And I mean, I've known especially a lot of welders by trade who can also either run equipment or they have some other type of business because in the slow seasons or when there's not a need for welding, they have something to fall back on or they have something else to contribute. Or a rig welder that can work on a main line but can also fab pipe.
Right.
You got to be able to do both. You're not going to last long, or you're
Mhm,
just going to be chasing the work. And so I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can be strategic for the future.
mhm.
Being able to offer more than one service, and you're going to be able to take care of yourself, be able to take care of your family, and maybe even go out on your own, do your own thing. But being able to position yourself in the Permian like you are, coming in, you obviously have great product that you're offering and exceptional service like what you're saying that you're going to deliver no matter what, and then getting involved with the local organizations and helping pave the way for the future. And so that's what I've found, especially as I've moved out of oil and gas. I market oil and gas. I love working in the oil and gas industry because I know it. I've been out there. I've definitely been on my fair share of locations, put in my time, but I think that building the right future and saying, okay, the ones that have the knowledge and experience that can teach the younger generation, but also teaching the younger generation to respect what we've been doing while implementing a lot of new innovations and ways to automate. And I know that like we had talked previously about something that you guys are working on with the hydro testing.
Right. Yeah, so, it's been a couple weeks now. I think we just got, the patent pending, back, and so essentially what we're doing here's the problem that we witnessed. I was on a phone call the other day with a producer. They were running a lateral line, and I heard a couple of the engineers talk about they accidentally overpressured the lateral line during the hydro test, and it's a steel lateral
Oh,
line.
okay. Yeah.
So which is tough to do, but it
Yeah.
happens. So what happened with that is I think it's about 19 miles of line. It's a throwaway at that point in time, right? It's got to
That
be
and what was
redone.
the size of the
I believe that was 10 inch,
10-inch?
10 inch,
That's
right?
that's a lot of money.
So it's a lot of money, a lot of time,
A lot of
right? And starting
time.
over from scratch.
Wow.
So that we've got a new patent pending module. We call it the I Test Safely module. And what it does not replace a human, but when you're doing hydro testing, especially with HDPE pipe, which is proliferating out here in the Permian Basin,
Mhm.
there's a lot of nuances to that testing, making sure you're testing both to the code and the customer specs. So it looks like a briefcase, and you essentially show up, plug it in. It can run your fill pump, your pressure pump. It has the test protocol in the logic controller, and of course, a bunch of automated valves and safety controls. And then it knows the test parameters, your ramp up times, your hold times.
Mhm.
It's going to do all of that at the manifold by itself without needing a user to interact with it. And then it's going to digitize those documents, which will really help with mega rule. We think moving forward, everyone's still a little not sure what mega rule is. So we're just documenting everything at the time,
Right.
right? And there's a couple of benefits there too. A ton of them. One, anytime you get a human away from a manifold, not all the time, but for the duration of the test, that's good because a lot of times that's where some leaks can occur, and they're smaller diameter pipes, so they're less risk.
Mhm.
But this takes that out of it. It also makes sure that that test protocol the pipeline is being tested exactly to the test protocol. There's no room for interpretation out
Right.
there, which happens today.
Yes, it
It
does.
has to, especially with HDPE pipe. Let's say we're testing. It's West Texas right now. We're swinging between like 40 at night and 75,
Exactly. The
right?
change in the temperature
Well,
can.
every 10 degrees on
Mhm.
HDPE is a different, it changes that maximum pressure. So you could accident that you need to test it to. So you could accidentally overpressure your pipe according to the test plan that you've been given, right? But this logic controller takes all of that into account. It's going to be monitoring the temperature, not just of the fluid that's in the line, but the pipeline itself and ambient temperature. And it takes all of those things and says, okay, the right thing to do is it's a little bit warm. So instead of testing it at 190 psi, I get to run it to 165.
Mhm.
And it's still a valid test and it's good to go into service, but I don't worry about overpressuring the pipe.
Right.
And the worst thing, especially with HDPE pipe, is you overpressurize it, you didn't realize it, right? And then it goes into service and you don't realize that you've actually just slightly overstretched that pipe.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
hopefully everything is okay,
Mhm.
but there's a chance down the road it might not be
Mhm.
okay. And so that's the method. We only have one unit right now. It's in beta testing, and we actually have some companies coming out next week. We built a test loop at our facility out of HDPE pipe
Okay.
so that we can bring them out and then show them. And then we're experimenting with a few other things because it's so compact and it uses very little low electricity. We're experimenting with, we got some solar panels and
Nice.
we're powering it and doing batteries to kind of show that, hey, look, we could help you with your ESG goals, right? Or we can run it off of
Mhm.
your
You
standard
have
diesel
options.
generator, right? So
Right.
what's important to you? Maybe we're doing an HDPE pipe through a really nice fancy neighborhood, and their HOA
Oh,
is going to
right.
go nuts about that diesel generator back there.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well let's get you a quiet battery pack so that we don't disturb the neighbors, right?
That's awesome.
So
Wow, that's very mindful, very like I said, I mean, like future thinking and wanting to kind of show like, hey, the oil and gas industry is can be very compliant with using solar and electric and but it's working together.
right.
It's utilizing both. And so I think that I can only imagine that there's going to be a lot of good that's going to come out of that and that's really exciting.
Yeah, I really hope so. And it's interesting that you mentioned compliance, and I've worked in different industries, and one of the highlights that I think of oil and gas is we are so compliant and we are so safe, and that's a relative term, right? I spent a little bit of time working in food manufacturing. In oil and gas, let's say you have a company and your total recordable incident rate is over one. You are blacklisted from
Yeah,
all of the top dogs.
absolutely.
Over one. Well, in a lot of these food manufacturers, especially like meat processing, their TRIR is like 7, or I've
Mhm.
seen 14, and just all sorts of accidents. And it's I get these conflicting signals, of course, because now you drive around and you see all these legal billboards talking about, "Hey, oil field workers, are you
Yeah,
hurt?" Right?
yes,
The
yes.
the standard
There's
ambulance
a lot of that.
chasers, which I understand, and
Mhm.
and if you do get hurt, you do need to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are out there every day, this fleet of people that goes out, this army of people that go out and work in these harsh conditions, and they're coming home safely,
Right.
and they take care of the environment, and they make sure everything is compliant. Just this morning, that we didn't get the job off. We were missing the drug test. We hadn't submitted it appropriately for our technician, and it was not a big fuss, but it was, hey, we are not starting this job till you get the right paperwork in.
Right.
And it wasn't rude. It was just
That's a
that's
standard.
that's the standard, right?
Absolutely.
And I, get them the paperwork, and then because we know we have it, get them the paperwork. start the job, right? But we don't press go without the proper
You gotta
procedures.
make sure your T's are crossed. You gotta make sure that everything is in place, and I'm really excited about where we are in oil and gas right now and what's to come, and really eager to see how things go for you guys in 2024
Yeah, me
and
too.
coming out
Me
to the
too.
Permian Basin. It sounds like you've got a lot, happening and a lot of exciting things, so, thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you for sharing, and we really look forward to seeing what happens for you guys with Ion Pro.
Oh, pleasure is all mine.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.